Welcome back to another week of The Rebel's Edge, where Pete and I will break down what's going on just ahead of the jobs report for February, which comes our way this Friday. So, with that as a backdrop, let's get started with The Rebel's Edge. Bam.
Another week. I'll tell you what, if it's anything like last week, John, we're in for another really wild ride. I mean, is there? You were showing me the memes and everything else that's followed up ever since Friday. And it's amazing. It really, really is. These are different times.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. And I must say that it's very entertaining, Pete, but not always entertaining if you're long stocks and all of a sudden they decide to kick the crap out of the market for the last hour, and then they reverse it and run it to the upside. Wow. Just wow. It was all about bounces and support as well as resistance last week, Pete.
Yep. And the volatility itself stood out. I mean, there's a reason why that volatility crept up towards 20 and is sitting there still, and it hasn't pulled back hardly at all because there's a lot going on.
And tomorrow, Pete, we're going to find out about the tariffs. Now, President Trump has said it's going to be 25% Canada and Mexico because they haven't done what he's asked for. And we'll see. Howard Lutnick, the former CEO over at Cantor Fitzgerald, was saying, it might be a little less than 25. We'll have to see. Well, let's dive into macro, Pete. We kind of touched on it, I guess, with a little bit of that discussion. Macro, the German DAX 30, that's sort of their Dow Jones Industrials, if you will, over in Germany, up over 3% today. Positive market sentiment. Why? Well, because they're going to have to spend a heck of a lot more on defense spending because of geopolitical risks. That's why, Pete.
Yeah, and I'm just going to jump on the bandwagon of something we did touch on already, which is the Trump tariffs and Zelensky and the combination of that, John, and the reaction, and then the reaction to the reaction, all of that, absolutely amazing. I mean, the fact that we finished up on 600 points on the day on Friday, pretty outrageous. I don't know that I've seen the markets move quite like that in a really, really long time, especially given that backdrop and understanding that people were pretty confused and trying to figure this whole thing out and seeing something like that for their own, eyes and ears to listen to. That was an amazing event, absolutely amazing event. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying it's an amazing thing to watch.
It kind of felt, Pete, like, I was, doing our cocktail hour with the folks at Market Rebellion, where it's actually broadcast, folks. You have to be a subscriber, but it is broadcast. And we were talking about what we were seeing in the market. And it seemed like a lot of people were leaning a little too short going into that final hour. Many cases, many times, they're leaning too short and they're the newbies to shorting the market. They're not really the experienced shorts. But experienced shorts can get caught too. And whatever it was, there were a lot of people trying to cover going into that final 30 minutes. All right, Let's talk about fantastic futures. And I'm going to say strategic digital reserve for cryptos. President Trump promised us that, Pete. David Sachs, his head of cryptos and so forth, has said it's coming. Well, they announced it. And all the cryptos jumped except for Ethereum and Bitcoin until Trump tweeted out, of course I mean Ethereum and Bitcoin too. And then they both, boom, to the upside.
Yeah, you got to love that. I think for the fantastic futures, John and I have been hitting this all the time for all the right reasons. When you go back to last week and you look at Thursday and we see not just one, we see two volatility hits that were massive trades, that 50-cent character, unbelievable trades that came in there. And John, we've been talking about that VIX for a while, and we've been moving up and up and up. And here we are, we're finding ourselves at a comfortable level now at 20. And like you and I have said, This isn't panic running around. This is where the markets are going in this back and forth, and Friday being a perfect example of that. That's why 20 is probably the right area to be. Maybe it's 21, maybe it's 22, but we have that guy 50 Cent out there buying massive upside calls. So and a lot of them, John, are actually fairly close to the money at this point in time. They're 21 strike calls, 22 strike calls, doing spreads and all the rest, but it is something that we are seeing more and more of, probably more in the last month than I remember seeing in a very long time. Just these volatility hits, and they've been right.
And a lot of them were in the real short term, Pete, like March.
Yeah.
And what I'll say is tomorrow might not be the top in volatility, but we are likely to see more volatility tomorrow. Now, volatility swings both ways. And Pete has said many times, you got to be quick to take your profits when it pops to the upside. Couldn't agree more. We'll see exactly how that plays out, Pete, but definitely tomorrow, the 4th, is when the president has said he's hitting them with tariffs. I would take him at his word. So it's just a question of how big they are and the response from Canada, Mexico, and to a certain extent, China, because he's jacking up another 10% on China too. Right. All right, Pete, let's talk about TK Therapeutics. These guys have a treatment for multiple sclerosis, and it's known as Briumvi. And that treatment apparently is in high demand because I saw, Pete, on their release that the sales were up 250% year over year. So, God bless all those poor folks that were suffering with MS to have something like this out there that people are obviously getting more and more comfortable with, and the sales are going through the roof.
Through the roof is unbelievable. It's an understatement. I mean, it's unbelievable to see what these guys are doing. It's a third of all their sales. This is a biotech company, John, that's trading with a PE of 20. That doesn't happen very often either.
That's pretty low.
So that gives you a pretty good idea. And is it near the 52-week highs? Absolutely it is. Is it at 52-week highs? Not quite yet, but it's pushing right up against there. Last I looked, it was trading a little bit north of $35. It was 37 for the 52-week highs. The forecast is good. What they showed, what they're doing right now is great. I think they are clicking in all the right ways. And there's a little bit of shorts out there getting squeezed as well. About 16 to 17% of that outstanding is sitting there at about 16 or 17%. So a squeeze, pretty much, yes, that's part of this as well. So a really nice move to the upside. I think it's up about 16, 17% if it's holding on to the gains that I'd seen earlier. It was moving to the upside. And quite frankly, I think this is a stock that has a lot of room past that 52-week high.
Well, Pete, what do you think of this one? We're sort of leaning on Pete heavy in these first two folks because this one's Aclarion, symbol ACON. This is a diagnostic for, like, basically, let's say spinal surgery, Pete, because that's when I was reading the release, that's what it was about as far as why it was moving up. They signed a commercial partnership with Scripps. Now, for those who don't know, our dad was a transplant surgeon, kidneys, liver, pancreas, all that, and really focused on a lot of the treatments and diagnostic tools that would help people. And that's why he was studying at Scripps for a while. Pete and I got to live in La Jolla while he was doing that. Well, Scripps is one of the most noted places for if they say something's good, the rest of the world says, okay. Because these guys are very well respected. And the fact that this is for spine surgery, Pete, and Northwestern University is also using it, I think that is a big deal for ACON.
Yeah, Aclarion it's amazing, John, what these guys have been able to do. But this is also a stock that was extremely higher than it is right now, but it's been a heck of a move today. So a bit of a savior right now in terms of what's going on. Healthcare technology is moving, and it's moving very rapidly. And what they've been able to do and accomplish in this partnership that they've gotten now with Scripps, that's huge. I mean, to be a part of that says a lot about where they are, what they're doing, how they're able to do this and implement this, and the critical treatments that go on. All of this within this one company is really, really something that's going to be very beneficial. I think it'll be beneficial as well for Scripps, John, but obviously Scripps with that name, I think that really is what's carrying this one. And pretty nice move to the upside today. What was it? 70%? 70?
75% right now, Pete, I'm looking at.
There you go.
But as Pete said, take a look 6 months ago at where the stock was.
Yeah.
I mean, when you do that, you'll realize that there's also been some bad, along with today's good. There's been some bad that they've stumbled a few times. And when they did, people made them pay the price.
Yep.
All right, Pete, TKO Endeavor.
Yeah.
So TKO is, as the name sounds, TKO Group Holdings. They're an entertainment company. They are closing on their acquisition of IMG. Now, they own, Professional Bull Riders, PBR. Pete loves that because he's got a big PBR, Professional Bull Riders belt buckle.
I do.
The Endeavor Group, basically that's UFC and WWE, Pete. So I guess it makes some sense that Mr. Emmanuel, who runs Endeavor, decides, you know what, we're going to get rid of IMG and we're going to focus on these other properties. They have all kinds of interesting things, Pete. We're talking about the British Open, the All England Tennis Club, also known by most of us as Wimbledon. I mean, these are big properties. Mr. Emmanuel doesn't screw around, Pete, when he goes after these things. And IMG, by the way, that's where most of the people that you're going to see in the sports segment, that's where they train. Yep. Because IMG is not just for high school kids and so forth to get into D1 schools. It's also where an awful lot of athletes go to get trained up to get faster and stronger for the combine. So what do you think of this deal, Pete?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think they're doing the right thing. They've been expanding, as you mentioned, that PBR. They do over 200 global events a year with the PBR, the Pro Bull Riders. So it's amazing what they've put together, all these different entities, and it's entertainment, it's sports, it's all of that. The free cash flow here, John, of the company, $500 million. They got about a 9% short. It's right near the 52-week highs of 151. I think people are enjoying what they're doing and very much appreciative of how they're grabbing other pieces to this puzzle and adding it to it. This is an unbelievable company, actually. If you go back and you see all the different entities that they've got and they continue to acquire, they've got it all, John. I mean, they really do. In the entertainment world, they cover it. So I like what we're seeing. I think they've done the right thing. And I think the fact that we're up there near those 52-week highs, because a lot of the time when you look at folks that do mergers and acquisitions and so forth, there's a big reaction where, well, it cost them this, we're going to sell a little bit of this thing. This thing's going down. That is not what's happening here. These guys are going up and up and up and pushing against those 52-week highs. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a stock that's close to 200 by the end of the year.
Pete, 154 and change was what it got to today. Oh. So just a massive jump to the upside. And by the way, we did have unusual activity. I mean, we had unusual activity in this name when the stock was significantly lower, 147, in fact. Just last week or so, Pete, the 27th, Thursday last week, I guess, it was 147. Well, today it hits 154. And like I say, they had 3,000 of these April 155 calls. So thumbs up for all the folks that followed unusual into this one, Pete.
Love it. Love it.
All right. Let's wind it up with XPEV. They're going to report fourth quarter and fiscal 2024 final results on March 18th. Well, they delivered 30,000 vehicles in February, Pete. That's up 570% year over year. Okay, so in other words, their deliveries last year were 600,000. Not so shabby. You know, there's an awful lot of companies that don't come anywhere near that. But there's one, Pete, that does more like millions of cars, like 400,000 per quarter. And that'd be Tesla. Yeah. So I know all these guys think they're the big competitor against Tesla. The one that I keep my eye on, Pete, is Boyd, BYD. BYD is the one that I think produces a real quality vehicle in line with the Teslas. And they're also up there cranking out massive amounts. But Lee and XPEV, they got a ways to go before they can compete with Tesla.
they've got a ways to go, and they make the jump that they've made, John. One of the problems that I was looking at was, what do these margins really look like for these guys? I mean, yeah, they're making the deliveries, but what do they do from a margin perspective? And I think that's a question that will get answered pretty soon, because they actually have their earnings on the 18th of March. So we will find some of these things out. And despite the fact that it sounded like a very positive, that they were able to deliver 30,000 vehicles, up 570%, like you just discussed a year ago, the stock's down 4%. Why is it down 4%? Well, because you're able to get those deliveries, there's a lot of different factors that we all want to look at to make sure that that makes more sense. I mean, so it looks like they had some good numbers, but not enough good numbers. And I think the bad numbers outweighed it, and with the margins being the biggest one. And so because of that, I think this is one of those names, John, another one of those names over there in China. They're going to be competitive because they can, and they've got the backing of the government. But outside of that, they are nothing close to a Tesla. Absolutely not even in the same ballpark. You're right. So until they can get there, they're not there yet. I think Tesla's going to still stand out as the number one when it comes to EVs.
Yeah. I think BYD, Pete, the reason I like that one as a competitor to Tesla, it's still a Chinese vehicle. So good luck getting your parts and all that, folks. But they make some beautiful vehicles, Pete. They're SUVs. They got the guy that designed the Bentley SUV, I think. They got some of the folks that designed the McLaren, the sports car, the supercar, if you will. So yeah, XPEV, they don't have those guys, but BYD does. And that's why for the longest time, Buffett was a believer too in BYD, by the way. Yeah. All right. Now, a lot of you know that, as I said at the top of the show, when you talk about TKO, you're talking about IMG. A lot of athletes really are focused on the numbers, not just what they did on the field, but what are they going to do at the combine? Because if you run a 4.9 and you're 330 pounds, like this one offensive lineman Pete's going to talk about, well, that's pretty impressive. And if you're a safety and you're running 4.25 or whatever, also impressive. Watch the technique of this guy, Pete, because he looks like he has really been trained to go fast, and yet he is beyond just a fast guy running a 40-yard dash. But let's take a look.
How about the size of this tight end?
Look at the sheer girth. Oh, the guy's 6'8" or 9. That's moving. And look at his build. I mean, what are we looking at?
One hand.
I'll tell you what, it's a combination of unreal talent and a little bit of stick 'em on those daggone things, but it's all good.
Oh, yeah.
My guess is his hand is big enough that ball is like a ball.
Which Pete and I have always said is important, and obviously they work on this. But I mean, you catch it with your hands. You don't let the ball come in and hit you in your elbow socket, basically right there, and cradle it like that. You put it there after you've caught it with your hands. That kid was impressive, Pete.
Yep.
Big man, too.
So here's the takeaway that I've got for us, John, because I love the combine. I watch it. Matter of fact, last year, you know how many people watched the combine last year? 5 million. Do you think the NBA, who gets 1.5 million, would like to see that 5 million number? I think that they would. This is just for the combine, which is a pretty meaningless thing, right? I mean, it's great to know the 40 times and the verticals and the broad jumps and the bench press, all of that stuff that they do. But the reality is, put on the film and let's see what it looks like. I mean, there is talent there, unbelievable strength, of athleticism, all of those things. There's one guy who this year did stand out for me, John. I went back and I looked at the top 10 for bench press and 40 times and all the rest of it. Most of those guys who are in the top 10 at the combine have no NFL career or experience at all, because when they went there, they did what they did and they're talented, but you put them on a football field with a helmet and everything else, they're a different person. And that's the thing you've got to find out is, do we have the right guy who also has these right numbers? There's a kid this year from South Carolina, Nick Emenwari, who's a safety. He's 6'3.5", 225 pounds. He ran a 4.38 40, a 43-inch vertical, 11.6-inch broad jump. I mean, there's not a number he didn't reach and blow away. And they have a system, John, where they give you a number of what your number looks like. This kid had a perfect 10. Nobody's ever had a perfect 10. This kid had a perfect 10. Now, he actually can play football. That's the good thing here, because sure, it helped his draft status a little bit. He's an All-American first team, All SEC first team. He was an All Freshman All-American. He was also an All SEC All-American back in 2022. So this is a guy who actually has both, which you don't see very often. A guy who's the best safety coming out, and he's got all these numbers that he's got behind him. I mean, it really is special to see that. And like I said, I went through it. The guys who put up 45 reps on the bench, you and I don't know who they are. There's a lot of other guys out there, John, who are significantly down from that, but they get out there on the football field. They're football players. They're not the airport players like you and I talk about. So it is fun to watch I don't know what the combine numbers look like this year because it was too early and they hadn't put them out yet. But my guess would be we'd be somewhere close to that 5 million mark again. I think weather plays a part around the country too, if people are going to sit in their houses and watch this thing. But I'll tell you what, it is unbelievable to see the athleticism of what these guys can do.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I was looking at one big offensive lineman from Georgia, Pete, and the kid's a beast, 6'6", 330. He's projected to be a guard in the NFL, and you're just like, oh my God. And he ran a 4.97, and he has this great mullet that Rich Eisen and those guys couldn't get enough of the mullet. They were just commenting more on the mullet than the fact that the guy beat Tom Brady's 40 time by like 0.3. I mean, because I think Tom Brady was a 5'3", Pete.
It was awful.
Like a big Columbus when he's running, but obviously he trained and got a lot better. But when he was just kind of, loping along, it doesn't look the same. When these guys are running like this, they've been trained for speed.
Yep.
And that big guy, by the way, Pete, his rating was a 9.97 out of 10, like you said. And Cooper DeJean, the kid that had the interception on his birthday in the Super Bowl, well, that kid had to be pretty damn close to a 10 too, Pete. Because of his 40 times, with his agility and his on-field performance, not just in the gym performance, pretty amazing.
Well, and the number of guys this year who ran somewhere in the 4.2 range for the 40-yard dash, the number just gets bigger each year. These guys, the speed, John, is amazing. And DeJean was one of those guys. I mean, he was somewhere very, very high up as far as what his speed was at the combine as well, which just added to who he was at Iowa. And then obviously we saw him in the Super Bowl, and the tenacity that he had, and the fact that he got that interception, returns it for a touchdown on his birthday and everything else, pretty outstanding. The other thing I wanted to hit was this, John. It's funny because everybody is saying there's only really 2 quarterbacks this year in the draft. And they basically Shedeur Sanders and Ward, Cam Ward from Miami. Now, Cam Ward has played, I think, at 3 different universities in 6 years. Shedeur has played at a couple different universities. Not a big deal. That part's not a big deal. But what I saw from those guys was impressive. They didn't compete at the combine. I mean, just on the field. What they did was extremely impressive. But, John, I'll tell you what, that kid, and I brought him up before to us last week when we were kind of looking at what to look for in the combine. Jackson Dart, he just lit it up again. That kid is going to be somewhere. And if he slips out of the first round, and Brady Cook, the kid from Missouri, is another one. Brady Cook at Missouri is unbelievable. His numbers were absolutely astounding. The problem for him is they ran the ball at Mizzou. They were one of those SEC teams that they were about 50-50 running and passing. So it didn't ever really get the opportunity for him to show himself as much. But at the combine, he also got a 10 at the combine. He ran a 4.6 40. He did this, he did that, all the things that you'd want in a really solid quarterback. But he didn't throw nearly as many passes as all of his competitors, in the SEC, even just to select those guys out. But I'm here to tell you, I think that there's more depth in the quarterback this year than a lot of people think. It's not just 2 guys. I think there's 5 or 6 that could be starters, not right away, not maybe even the first year, but could be starters in the NFL going forward, because there's a lot of talented guys out there, and the coaches at the college level just get better every single year to get these guys prepared to be in the NFL. So I think this is another year where, last year was a big quarterback year. I think this year's another really good quarterback year, but some of these guys will slip to the second and third rounds, and they're good. They are going to be starters on NFL teams.
Oh yeah, and Cook is one of them, Pete. You're right. And in many cases, once the scouts know, because Pete knows NFL scouts, folks, Robinson being one of them, Pete, that, these guys are watching not just the combine, because again, that's cool, but you're really, were you watching them when they played another SEC team with good, defenders in the case of Cook, since he's a quarterback and so forth? What were his decisions and so forth? And those scouts, after they notice a guy, they kind of shut up. They kind of, because they'd like to pick that guy up in the second or third round. I'm not saying he slips to that, Pete. You've already said Jackson Dart with an X, Jax. Jackson Dart, yeah, he's going to get the looks. But this guy, Tyler Show, Pete, at Louisville, also a beast, a beast. 4.64, so he's almost as fast as Cook. That's basically your lean at the end that determines 4.6 versus 4.64. I mean, that kid is fast as heck too, and put up some pretty good numbers. So there will be a couple of those guys, I agree with Pete, that will be playing soon. If not the first year out, they'll be playing soon in the NFL.
Yep, should be fun. I'll tell you what, it's amazing, John. 24/7, the NFL has ratings. When you look at some of the other sports, you almost feel bad. I mean, to some degree, not for the NBA, because there are a bunch of guys sitting out, but outside of that, I wish hockey and some of those got a little bit more from the rating standpoint, just because great sports. And I love what happened with the NHL, during their week off this year, when they didn't do that whole thing with all the superstars. They did it with the countries. That was a winner, and that will help them with their ratings the rest of the year.
Yep. Well, it is always an interesting month or so, Pete, before we get to what is it? It's in Lambeau this year, right? The draft.
Yeah, the draft.
The draft.
Lambeau.
That'll be interesting, to be in Lambeau Field for that. I can't wait.
Yep.
But there are so many good players that deserve a lot more accolades, and they'll get them, but they'll get them at the next level, because like you said, if Cook didn't get a chance, I mean, he still threw for 49 touchdowns, I think, Pete. So it's not like, oh yeah, they're a running team, Pete says. Yeah, they are, but he got a lot of touchdowns in there. I don't know if a lot of those were, once they got down to the 10 into the red zone and so forth, Pete, he just popped them to the tight end or whatever. But that's a lot of touchdowns in a career.
Those guys they're good players, man. We're lucky. We're in a good time in life, and these offensive coordinators are doing the right thing with these quarterbacks as well.
All right. Well, so that's going to do it for us, I guess, today, Pete. As usual, we appreciate all of you joining us. We hope that you check out RebelCon 2025, because RebelCon is going on March 22nd. Our friend Grant Cardone, friend and business partner Grant Cardone, will be kicking it off March 19th, 20th, 21st, and then we take over the 22nd. If you'd like to be there in Vegas at the MGM Grand, by all means, scan that QR code, join us. We'd love to have you. We're going to show you some tricks, but they're legitimate tricks that can make you a better trader. So think about it. We hope we see you there, and we'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m.
Eastern
Time.